we're human beings that are capable of changing, right? And when you label a human being as an int and saying you're not good at that, focus on what you're good at, and you tell yourself that story, well, that becomes your truth, right? Oh, I'm not good at numbers, or I'm not good at sales. Well, then you can be. You just have to work at it. It's just practice, right?
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Turing, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and in media partnership with C-Tech. Hiring is hard. COVID made it somewhat easier, somewhat harder, but definitely showed us that there are opportunities to make it more scalable, showed us that there are different biases that go into the hiring process, and that is exactly what I'm talking about today with Paul Bilodeau, CEO and founder at Filtered.AI. Paul Bilodeau is the CEO and founder of Filtered.AI, a capabilities-based hiring platform designed specifically for engineers, developers, and tech talent that helps to remove unconscious bias from the hiring process through assessments and coding tasks. Paul started his professional career as a recruiter for a leading recruitment firm in Boston. It wasn't long before he identified major disconnects and inefficiencies when it came to the hiring process. So in 2010, he created Pangea Connect, a video interviewing platform. Soon after, he co-founded data science consulting company Refactor.AI and built Filtered as an internal tool to ensure candidate authentication and more accurately assess candidates' technical skills. In 2018, the demand to license Filtered as a standalone product led to the establishment of Filtered Inc. and the continued drive to radically change the hiring process. Paul Bilodeau, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders all the way from Boston. How are you?
I'm good, Michael. I'm happy to join.
I'm really happy that you're here. We thought about the connection with Andrew just a second ago, and I'm really excited to hear about what you're doing with Filtered.AI. And before we dive into the recruiting space and the unconscious biases that we may have in the hiring and the way data science plays into all of it, I want to hear a little bit about your journey into this, because what I love hearing is how people got to where they are. And it sounds like you didn't just come up with this idea on a bright, shiny day. It actually evolved with your experiences from these different sectors. So Paul, tell me a little bit about your story and how did you get into founding Filtered.AI?
So basically, we started a data science consulting company in 2015, and we were trying to scale up teams, and we were doing the interview process, and so 2 phone screens before a personal round of interviews, looking at resumes, having people come on site or doing something remote like this, and having some sort of technical exercise that was subjective at best, and realizing that a lot of what we thought about the technical performance on the exercise that we had was due to bias, right? So we'd fall back to the resume. And, that no one from that company is any good, no one from that school is any good, or flip side, we noticed how there could be, false positives. If somebody worked at Amazon, you wouldn't question the solution, or in certain teams, or Apple or Google. Meanwhile, I looked at my partners like, well, if we hadn't worked together, you'd have never hired me. I'm an econ major. And, another thing that we realized was also is like just structuring an interview and getting out of this what we wanted to. And so yeah, that's kind of where it all started. And the other thing was like, look, we're going through all these steps in the process to realize that they can't do the work in the final step of the process. Like if we were hiring a chef, would we go through all these steps to realize they couldn't cook after 4 rounds of interviews, or should we just make them cook eggs first and then enter the hiring funnel? And that's kind of where it all started.
Real. Okay, so take me now into the hiring world and the recruiting world that you're in right now. Obviously, things have shifted dramatically over this past year. But it sounds to me like what you're describing, the process is pretty similar to also what's happening today. Maybe now it's happening more remotely, but it sounds like a pretty cumbersome process that at the end doesn't actually give a strong enough signal as to whether this is the right candidate for you, and it just creates a bad experience for all parties involved with often a bad outcome as well. So what is sort of the hiring process that you're observing and that you're also trying to change through Filtered.AI, and how does the AI part help you do that?
Yeah, so we sit in front of the job application in most cases, and resumes are never reviewed, and so that's a big shift in what we're doing. And really, what we've found is that the applicant tracking systems and that are in place that are matching keywords from a job description that 90% of the time the hiring manager didn't write is matching to a resume in order to shortlist, right? And so the folks that are getting shortlisted are usually just adding keywords, right? And so they're gaming the system, and the folks that actually did the job aren't doing it, and so you're screening in the wrong people and screening out the right people, right? So that's where we started, and there's also, we can anonymize it, right? So you could see HR could see PII data or video questions in a resume, whereas sharing with the hiring team, maybe they only see a technical exercise. And surprise, there's where diversity comes from. And even starting with some highly progressive, large technical teams in the Valley, whereas we only hire PhDs from top schools in this team, and then within 90 days, it wasn't, you no longer needed a PhD from a top school. You didn't need a PhD to get hired in that team. So, and really the AI for us has to do around, one, it was around fraud, right? And so with take home, there's a lot of fraud. And so it was, coding similarities. Is it the same person taking the interview? I mean, it's things that we didn't think we'd have to build, but somebody did a video portion, and then that's a different person doing coding, or someone, you see me, and then I hand over my laptop to somebody else sitting next to me on the couch, and then finishing the exercise. That's really kind of where it started.
Is that really something that you've observed happening? I didn't even think of that of hiring.
I didn't either. I didn't realize at this scale. And so even today, when you're using Filtered for a take-home challenge, and there's two different versions. There's a take-home, and then there's a live version, which is similar to this, but in recorded with coding pads, like an IDE integrated, as well as Jupyter and RStudio, so you can do an exercise here. But 11% of the time, there's two faces on the screen, or the face changes during the technical portion of the exercise. And so we know coding behaviors, around, we're not just doing inputs and outputs, we're scoring, is the code maintainable? Can you understand it? How many lines of code did it take to solve the problem? Because, if you're not evaluating the coding behaviors as well as the scores, they're not really solving the problem here. Because, for example, like in a former life, I was a basketball player. And if we shoot free throws, right, and we both hit 9 out of 10, but I shot underhand, am I really as good as you are? Right? And so we kind of see that behavior.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm hearing a few different things. I'm hearing both this idea of, okay, so we have the resumes and we have the whole projection of the whole shortlisting, and then we have the actual, onboarding and actual investigation. Is this the right candidate for us? And it sounds to me, but tell me more yourself. What has been happening over this past year from your perspective as more and more went remote? I'm guessing that the problem just became worse because everything went remote and people didn't know how to adapt. But what have you been observing on this on actual field?
Yeah, the first thing when shelter in place happened, the first thing was the 470,000 recruiting coordinators who are responsible for scheduling interviews with a candidate, going to meet them at the front desk, walking them in, put them in a conference room, going to get the first interviewer, knocking on the window when there's 5 minutes remaining, and they're going to get the next person, and then debriefing and walking them out. That doesn't exist. And then there's high transaction costs when it comes to scheduling, right, and gathering feedback. So we built live rooms with it's a hiring workspace, really. And so it has workflows so that if I need 5 more minutes with a candidate, I press a button. It's also transcribed. We have sentiment analysis on it. And so we're analyzing the interview as well, right? And really what we're trying to do there is to stop subjective interviews, like do structured interviewing. Like you have multiple teams in the same company hiring the same skill set, asking different questions, even though they're doing most the same thing. And when you receive feedback such as, I just didn't get a good feeling, well, that means you're not actually interviewing. You're talking about questions that really aren't going to, that create bias, really. Like, how did you like working at this company and things of that nature? So we're analyzing those questions. We're also, if it's a panel interview and 3 people on my team have really liked the candidate, I get a notification that instead of doing the interview, I'm supposed to sell the candidate, right? Shifting gears right away so that I know, like, I'm not letting you walk away with, well, they just grilled me for 4 hours and didn't sell me on the opportunity. I don't even know how it is to work there. I'm not going to take that role. Right. And so it's really kind of being able to be actionable during the process.
That's really interesting because I heard, on one hand, this idea of moving from subjective to objective and understanding that we have these different biases. I'm really into behavioral economics, so all these cognitive biases that we have with us constantly, they're hindering our ability to really measure the candidate in an honest way. Yep. At the same time, I'm hearing that you actually need that objectivity in the beginning phase to be able to move to the more personal aspect, which is the actual onboarding and actually, once you reach the right candidate, giving them that good experience, right?
Yes. Yeah, correct. Because you're hiring humans, right? Exactly. And when you look at the process for most of these companies, we can't attract good people. We hear from digital transformation, Fortune 500, which is where we started. It's not that you can't attract good people, it's your process. And if you want to attract the folks from the FANGs of the world, then have them interact with code first, or doing an exercise because that's what you're doing there. You're not talking to someone in talent acquisition who asks, why do you want to work here? And technical questions they don't know the answers to. And that takes 20 days to schedule that. Right. So I think it's more of a flawed process than anything. And so trying to humanize this process using AI, which is kind of an oxymoron, but that's what we're doing.
So what is the biggest challenge here when you're talking about humanizing through AI and rethinking the funnel from the resume all the way to the selling point of the candidate? As you're observing this whole funnel, what's the hardest thing to crack here?
Is change, right? Selling into companies that have been doing things for the same way for 30 years, right? I'd have to go to the board of directors to change our job application process, even though they know it's broken. Only 10% of the applicants finish the process. So it's introducing change, and it's also AI can feel like automation of your job, and it's not. So there's a lot of fear in the industry, and it's really about helping them to understand, like, we're going to help you cast a wider net. We're not replacing you. We're making you more efficient at your job by helping you do it at scale.
Right. And do you see this specifically relevant for more of engineering type jobs where you can easily quantifiably measure one candidate versus another? What about the other, 70 or 80% of the positions that also, I'm guessing, have a broken system of hiring and of measuring, even probably more broken because they don't have a lot of the basic tools that tech companies today have?
Yeah, so we started in engineering, just dogfooding it, and also under the guise of as things are being automated, right, and jobs are changing. There's more technical jobs, right? So like even in marketing, the second most desired skill now is data, right? Financial analysts have to write SQL, right? And so your non-technical jobs are now requiring technical skills. And so, we've looked at other areas around evaluation, but then it has to be a practical exercise, right? I mean, I wish we could do it with sales. I mean, we did a lot of interviews internally for sales folks. But, I don't believe in the Myers-Briggs and those personality types. I think they're general enough so you believe in them, and like a horoscope. But, so you get the Barnum effect. And I also believe that these systems, we're human beings that are capable of changing, right? And when you label a human being as an int and saying you're not good at that, focus on what you're good at, and you tell yourself that story, well, that becomes your truth, right? Oh, I'm not good at numbers, or I'm not good at sales. Well, then you can be. You just have to work at it. It's just practice, right? But yeah, I mean, so we have looking at, if it's project manager, maybe it's looking at a document and then a project plan and highlighting areas where you would start first, right? Or problem resolution and things of that nature.
Tell me a little bit about the onboarding. So you come to a company, some of your clients are big clients. You're coming there and you're saying, listen, everyone, we have this new way of thinking. Look at our insights, and I'm guessing sometimes your insights are contradictory to what their gut feelings are telling them about perhaps a specific person. How do you then manage that?
Yeah. So we have a lot of interesting data. We will show up with pass and fail rates based on day and time of the week, but that normalizes by the end of the week. So we know the worst times for candidates days and times for candidates to interview. Conversely, we also know the best days, the higher pass rates. And you don't pick up on that because, again, it's the week or the month, and it's just normalized. But the worst day of the week to interview is Monday morning, right, for the candidate. It sounds great scheduling it, but a case of the Mondays,
right,
or before lunchtime, right, and so like at 11 o'clock, and because we're humans and we have hormones, like you get hungry, and then your perception of the candidate changes. So it's not objective. When we start to show the insights.
Study with a court, and they found that judges are much more likely to give a larger sentence to a potential criminal if it's right before lunchtime, mainly because of a lot of the same biases that we were just talking about.
Yeah, it's similar to like back in the day, when you're buying an automobile, like don't buy the one that was built on a Friday. So have more flaws. Yeah. So again, we're humans. And so those insights help to kind of show, oh yeah, actually that does happen. Or, and so that's really kind of winning them over. And also it's the candidate experience, right? So,
right.
It's, we have 80% completion rates for taking a filtered versus an average of 20% filling, like you're finishing an online job application.
Wow. Okay, that's incredible, because at the end, it's not just about whether the candidate is the right candidate or not. It's about creating this funnel that is friendly enough to capture both types of candidates so that you don't miss out on them, but then having it be solid enough to actually be able to make those interesting choices. I have a few fun questions for the end, but a little bit of a deeper one before that. From basketball player, both in college and overseas, getting injured, but then moving into consulting and then data science, and now filtered. What is it about this issue that you're trying to solve that really gets you excited? That you're saying, this is the problem that I want to be working on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I think the problem is giving people a shot. I think that there are very talented people that don't get an opportunity based on, how their lot in life, like where they were born, where they went to school. I mean, this starts when you're a lot younger, and it prevents you, or it makes it harder. It doesn't prevent you. Like we can work hard and practice, but it's creating a bridge, right? And I think, even our team, like everybody, from engineering has to take a filtered, and when we were being evaluated, going through due diligence, the feedback was, you don't pay enough for engineering. You should, it's a third based on your team size of what we would see in the Valley. So they needed to do a code review to make sure it was real and scalable. And that was really just a bias, right? It's like we are hiring for what we need. And we're not over, we don't need to check all, do consensus hiring, checking all these boxes for where we are today. We know what areas we need to cover, and we know how to evaluate that. And people are hungry, right? Giving people the opportunity that maybe they wouldn't have received based on if it was a resume. If you're evaluating resumes and backgrounds.
Paul, are you ready for a few fun questions? I have 3 fun, difficult, non-committal questions.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Number 1.
Yes.
Favorite subject in school, K to 12. Your choice.
History.
I love it.
Yeah.
Any specific history point?
I liked early American history. I really liked some lessons around, leadership lessons. But yeah, that was kind of my most favorite.
Wonderful. One of role models that you look up to, professionally, personally.
Some that well, I played basketball, right? So if I go back to something that had an impact in my life, it was as my coach, from prep school, Max Good, that really influenced me and as a role model and really taught me how to be a man at a young age. I had a big ego in basketball and in high school, and teaching that how you behave represents your friends, your family, your teammates, and so it wasn't about you making a mistake and apologizing, and taught me that hard work was kind of the way forward. So, that's another thing that I haven't been able to shut off. If you ask my wife, I probably, we share the bed with Filtered, and Filtered sleeps in between us. But, it taught me focus.
I love it. Okay, last question. 3 words that you would choose to describe yourself.
Pragmatic. Generous, and authentic.
Pragmatic, generous, and authentic. Paul, thank you very, very much for joining me from Boston. I really
thank you so much.
Filtered. I love the idea of using AI to humanize the process, giving a fair shot, trying to lower the cognitive biases that we bring to the table so that we can actually bring on the right people and do the right process, both efficiently, but also in a way that's a win-win for everybody. Paul, thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care. It's great meeting you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.